Alright, day 12 of falling in love with the land of Israel. It says like that in Tuv Haaretz, chapter 3, part 1. I didn't do the earlier parts because it was too Kabbalistic. I wanted to focus more on the land. It's hard to fall in love with the land if you don't understand really the Kabbalah, and I'm not a Kabbalist, so I won't be able to explain it in a way that you will fall in love. So ask you local Orthodox Kabbalist. Now but this part, chapter 3, we can relate a bit more. Now we shall discuss the main differences between Eretz Israel and Chutz La'aretz, outside of the land Israel, as well as the differences in the divine providence of the Jews and the rest of the nations. The concept of prophecy, sorcery, repentance, and converts shall also be discussed. The concept of the headquarters of the external forces being above the firmament is rather confusing. For at times they are under the rule of the supernal realms. So too is the functioning of the body. At times we follow the will of our souls, yet sometimes we don't. This conduct is found in all of our lives, whether Jew or not, for that is a fundamental foundation from the time of creation. There is neither addition nor detraction from any of them. The only difference is that the Jews will fortify the ruling and power of the supernal holy forces, thus they will be sanctified. So that's the mission of the Jews. As well, a person's spiritual stature is affected by the preparations of his parents before his conception. Whatever the parents have in mind when they have intimacy, the level of love, happiness, care, pleasure, all will define what type of child you have. So the preparation of his parents before his conception affects the child, the spiritual stature of the child. The more they sanctify themselves, the more the soul of the child will be enclosed by holiness after he is born. Yet the other nations of the world are enclosed with impurity. Yet in all other aspects, humans are the same. So now, we're not saying that the nations are impure or bad or that. We're speaking about the overall thing. There are individual non-Jews who are much holier than Jews. We're speaking about the stature of how the spiritual system works and what forces is in charge of them. Because non-Jews have indirect nations, okay, speaking as a whole, nations of non-Jews have indirect connection with God as opposed to Israel. They have an angel in charge of them. Therefore, there is already a break into the spiritual forces, and there's a type of klipa. We call it impurity. Purity means there's a blockage. It's not direct. Impure doesn't mean you're bad. It means you have a level of disconnection. We're not trying to put down anyone, God forbid. The other nations of the world are under the dominion, and power of the external forces. Hence, they draw for their life force from the spreading out of impurity, whereas the Jews draw from their life force from the expansion of holiness. That is exactly like the ways of the rulership of the supernal holiness in its conducting the power of the external forces in the firmament. Just as the actions of man determine the quality of that conduct, so too man within himself determines for himself the quality of rulership of his being. If mankind improves its ways, then the power of the external forces are subjugated to the forces of holiness, and the forces of holiness will proliferate. Yet, if, heaven forbid, they destroy their ways, then the rule be given over to the external forces. Same is with man himself. If he magnifies his own Yetzer Hara, right, all that is the same thing. If he magnifies his own Yetzer Hara, his evil inclination and defilement, then the power of rule of himself will be given to the forces of the external forces. Yet, if he were to magnify the aspect of holiness, which is his own holy nefesh and other parts, then the rule over him is entirely given to the forces of holiness and will be sanctified. So the concept of Jew and non-Jew, land of Israel and the outside of Israel is similar. Everything is a mashal, everything is a metaphor to understand the different levels of the Jew and the non-Jew. The non-Jew is like the body, and the Jew is like the soul. Jews and non-Jews both have a Jew and a non-Jew aspect to them. Jew means the one who is more connected to his soul, to his intimate self, to his spiritual thing, and has a direct that is directly connected to God. The body is not directly connected to God. The body is only directed to God through the soul, and therefore is prone to be attracted to holiness. But if the body attach himself to the soul, then and the non-Jew attach himself to Israel, then there's a connection. The other lands attach themselves to the land of Israel. That's what will happen in the future. So everything is a connection. Again, don't take my words out of thing. We're speaking about the system in general, and about every individual has its own unique connection, and can be different than the general state of the nation, of the non-Jewish nation. That is why it says that there were non-Jews who were actually very holy, who wanted to convert at the time of Mount Sinai, when the Jews became Jewish, but they couldn't because they were part of the nations. And therefore, those who wanted to convert, become part of the Jewish people, who have that mission, then they are part of that Mount Sinai, of that conversion, so to speak. They converted later, or they got connected to God somehow. So the conduct of Chutz La'aretz. Now imagine in your mind two concepts. The conduct of Eretz Israel is the conduct of the holy ones and prophets, for they will purify their material self and rectify all their sense and intellect in order to be sanctified. That's the role of the Jewish people, to create a nation that is Mamlechet Kohanim Ve'Goy Kadosh, a nation of priests and a holy nation, as role model, like the soul has to be a role model for the body. They would be in total control over all their attributes and will compel all their natural instincts to holiness. They rid themselves of all physical attributes, all that enable them to control the cosmos and subjugate it to their will. So the conduct of Chutz La'aretz is totally given over to the ministering angels of each country. That's why technically a Jew who is outside the land of Israel is like a non-Jew, because he's connected to the spiritual power of that country, of that nation, and therefore he is prone to the forces of the not directly from God, unless he himself go out of his way to connect to the land of Israel and to God in his own very unique way. But unless he doesn't do anything, it's not going to be considered like really Jewish on a spiritual level, so to speak. Again, all those are metaphors. Don't take everything literally. We're speaking about deep concept, but to understand the general idea of the difference between the land of Israel and the other lands. So the conduct of Chutz La'aretz is totally given over to the ministering angel of each country. The knowledge of accessing this was the force of sorcerers, Chachtumim, in Egypt, as well as the power of witchcraft and any other power that involves subjugating the attributes of one's soul to them. This was the source of the power of Bilam and his students. So when one is on the outside country of Eretz Israel, then and those are real forces, one can attach himself to the angel or the powers of that country, from and therefore have special powers. We can think of people maybe like Illuminatis, or I don't know which one are true or not, which sect uses that or not, but this is an example of what dark people will try to do outside of the land of Israel. And so sorry. Okay. It is known that underneath those two are two other behaviors that resemble the above. First, one who lives in Eretz Israel and lives it, meaning that he has left the rulership of holiness into the realm of the rule of the ministering angels, thus is exactly the Jew who has subjected himself to evil characteristics and has given over his spiritual powers to the will of the Yetzer Hara. Thus he who leaves Eretz Israel is as if he has given himself over to the rule of the power of the external forces. That's why it says a Jew who goes outside the land of Israel is like an idol worshipper. He has, because he's choosing, so to speak, to be influenced indirectly, meaning to disconnect from God. He's using like the golden calf, he's using the forces of the country where he lives in now, so it's not direct. He has also given the cosmos over the rulership of the forces of those ministering angels. The above applies to he who leaves Eretz Israel, not for the purpose of a mitzvah. If you leave for a purpose of mitzvah and you have a very good reason, you ask your rabbi, you have a psak, and there's no, you do it because you know that's what God wants, then you can still be protected and still connected to the land of Israel and still connected to God. But if you go outside the land of Israel, you stay outside of the land of Israel for the wrong reason, because it's comfortable, because of selfish reasons, because you want more money, because it's hard to live in Israel, all those are wrong reasons, and therefore you are like controlled by those forces from the country where you live in. Second, this is the opposite of the above. That is the convert, the Baal Tshuva, the repentant, and others. In other words, they were on the outside, meaning they were under the rule of the Yetzer Hara, yet they have divested themselves of that force and have subjugated their Yetzer Hara, their evil inclination. And now they have entered into the realm of holiness and have drawn upon themselves the rulership of all supernal holy forces and have channeled all their attributes to holiness. So someone who does teshuvah, someone who converts, someone who repents, then is like someone who going back into the land of Israel. And reconnect to the spiritual forces. So again, let's understand that every case is different. This is the general rules, but the understanding what being Eretz Israel means, living in Eretz Israel means direct connection. It means you're connected in a way that everything you do is directly in relationship to God. And when you're outside the land, you are not connected really on that level. You're disconnected. You're not. You're lost into the nations, into you lost your mission, so to speak. You're not at your base of command where you're supposed to be a light into the nations. So to be continued, intense stuff, but very powerful. And may we all desire to be only directly connected to God, directly connected to our neshama, and God willing, we will all be able to elevate the entire world.